And what we're going to do now is another technique, one that you might enjoy just a little bit more. So it's going to be the jazz of lines. So we just did the engineering type mindset. We're going to go jazzy. And let me show you what that is. We're going to start same way. Ghosting. Making sure we get the size and the shape that we're looking for. Kind of rounding, getting a full sense, very light lines, but I have my sphere. Well, soon to be sphere. Right now it's a circle. Makes me happy. So, in order for us to get the relationship between these two shapes, there is nothing better than actually having a three-dimensional in front of you to actually do this. So I would suggest, maybe if you don't have a cube, but a box or a book. Not now, but eventually would be to actually grab a couple of boxes, grab a couple of books, and draw them from life. So what you want to do here is kind of set it up so you're seeing not just one side. This is too easy to draw. Can you guys see that? This makes it a little more interesting. Okay, I could draw that. It's just a rectangle with one line in the middle. But when we begin to see three sides, we're dealing with perspective, which would be the next stage of what we're doing here. But we are introducing perspective into this drawing, which is why I want you to think about this for a second. So when you're dealing with this, it's always best to do it from life. Here, there's an easy solution. I want to find, first of all, I see 1, 2, 3 sides. I see what I'm going to call the front, which is in full light, the side, which is in shadow, and the top. So I see 3 sides. What I'm going to try to identify is the distance and the location of the corner between front and side. So it should be right about here. And I also want to kind of see the angle. Now I notice, because I placed my pencil right on top of it, that it's not vertical. It has a little bit of angle tilting this way. So I mean, I could see that it's not fully vertical. I see it a little bit tilting this way. Not too much, but just enough so I could tell it's not a vertical. Now the distance between this point, that's going to be my crucial point. And my sphere is the biggest thing that I want to look out for here. Now notice that it's not, if I divided this in right in the center. So what we're looking for here is relationships. How to make sense of the relationship between these two objects in space. And then deal with the light. So we're looking at the sphere, at the circle. If I were to divide this in half, and I could visualize that. If I find the middle of that and I draw a line straight down, I could see that it's going to be somewhere like right here. So the distance and the relationship between that line that I just visualized and this one is about that. So that's one easy way to find out. But I could also see the space, the distance between this point, edge of the shape, and the corner. Next, it comes to proportion. So I could see that this might be right on the money. But if I'm going too long, or if it's too small, and I can't tell, how do I check it? Well, one way would be to measure the full. And what I'm doing here is, you may see artists do this all the time. So you actually place the tip of your pencil at the top of the circle, and then you move your thumb with a full extended arm right to the bottom of the circle. And then you want to make sure that the tip is right at the top of the circle and your thumb is right at the bottom. So that's going to be your unit of measurement. And then I'm going to move that tip of the pencil right down to the corner that we're talking about. And I'm going to see that, oh, wow, the circle is about 1/4 bigger than my square, than my cube. So now I know, and I have a measurement, that this should be bigger than this. And ta-da, look at that. I was pretty close because I measured to here. So if I were to place my pencil and I could measure it here or use a ruler, this needs to be 1, and the relationship between 1, this would be 3/4. So this is not 1 to 1. This is 1 to 3/4. So this, just take away 1/4 of the size, and you have your point. So now I have my top, my bottom, and then from here, I am going to identify angles. So once again, bring you back to me. I am going to place, imagine you're holding your pencil. Again, full extended arm is the key. You don't want to shift the distance because all of a sudden things become, out of proportion. You want to maintain a same distance, and we are not taking measurements. What we're doing is, imagine you're holding your pencil against a window. So to show you better, my pencil is not like this or like this. It's pointing straight up and down as if it were against the window. That's very important. So we get the right angle. And now I am tilting it, closing one eye so I could lay it right over this line. And I'm going to show you here. Right there. So closing one eye and moving that pencil right over that line, I could really just bring it straight down to my paper. And notice that I laid that pencil very close to what I think is that angle. Another way to think about it is a clock. So if you just isolate that line that we're about to draw, which is going to be the top of the front side, would that be 9 o'clock? No. Because 9 o'clock would be horizontal. This one, we could see a little tilt upwards. So I would call that about 9:15, 9:20. And again, it's becoming familiar with angles. And it doesn't matter how long, how far I take this. Now I want to take, in order for me to find this spot, I want to visualize, once again, a line that touches the edge of my shape here, my circle. Visualize it going all the way straight down. And what is the relationship between that edge and this point? And I could actually see it and do it, and it should be right about here. Maybe even a little less. Right about there. And that is how we mark our points. Now we do the same thing, just how we found this angle. I'm going to go ahead and finish this front. I know because of rule of perspective that this angle, this is very important. So if you're looking at the screen, once I found this angle, I found this angle. Because if it's a cube, they need to be parallel. So here's where our cubes begin to look a little funny if we're not paying attention. If this angle is not the same as the one right above it, you're off perspective. So we found this one, and if it feels right, that means we found the one at the bottom. So making sure these are parallel. And here's where all that practice, remember what we've been doing all morning? Maintaining the direction of the line. We have it there. And just the same, this angle has a parallel, which would be right here. So looking for that angle, I can ghost it and bring it right over. And just like that, I feel like I have it. Now, always referencing my image I want to find more clues that will confirm what I'm seeing. Because most of the time a cube. Yeah, I know how to do a cube. And then whoop, it doesn't look like a cube. Why? We skipped a couple of observation points. Okay, now these might get a little trickier. These are very important. And we're going to find that angle. The top side of the side plane. And you can actually see it. There's many ways you can do this. I noticed that there's an edge here at the shape that almost lines up perfect almost with the side of it. So I can go ahead and do that because it will be parallel to this one with a little bit of edge following it right there. So that's going to make it a little bit easier. Notice how I'm making it way longer than it should be because I don't know if this is going to go here or here. And until I realize that, I'm going to go ahead and place my pencil right above it again, making sure it's flat on a window. And this should be pointing like at 1:30. I would say 12, 1, 1:30, almost 2 o'clock. And bringing it right down. That's my angle. So once I see it, I lay it down. This is parallel to that. And it feels right. It looks right. It feels right. Now all I have to do is look at this one and make sure this one here is parallel to that one. Very important. Now, there is psychological scientific studies that when we see a vertical line as humans, when we see a vertical line, it makes us feel secure. It makes us feel powerful. It makes us feel calm. We see a horizontal line. It makes us feel also calm and firm. But anytime we had diagonals, there's a little bit of kind of anxiety and distress in it because it means action. It means something is falling. And this is like subconscious. So we tend to, this is very important. When we draw diagonals, we tend to calm them down. We tend to either get them closer to that horizontal or closer to that vertical. So my recommendation, and it's a big tip I always share, if you feel this line is parallel, force yourself to exaggerate against the grain. Meaning, I feel like it's like this. Realizing you have a tendency to probably flattening or straightening the line, exaggerate towards the opposite. You'll be much safer. And there are many, many optical illusions that would prove that. Where you think you see a line and your eyes and your mind are tricking you. And there it is. So we have a really good relationship here. If I wanted to, I'm going to go ahead and add, looking for that angle right there. And the continuation of it should be right here. And I could even bring that one in. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now here we come to the fun part. I hope you're with me so far. We're going to once again identify light direction. So wouldn't you say we went from lines, simple ghost lines, to more developed lines, to shapes, and we walked through angles, relationships, perspective, and now we are at shape volumes. So the next thing, obviously, we're going to deal with light and space. So for that, we're going to find our light direction. and we could see it literally because of the cast shadow coming down this way. I could see it. It's a little bit more front than back because I also see a highlight right here, a hot spot right there, lightest. And the key is going to be to find that direction of the light. And the clue is right here. Right here. And I'm going to curve it just a little more than a straight line. And it ends right here. So with my direction of light and this curvature, I begin to identify my light and shadow shapes. So there's one for the soon-to-be sphere. And there's a little tip that I'm going to give you here. When we have lines like this on a sphere, exponentially, as we get closer and closer to the edge, the curve becomes more curved. So when we get here, we tend to flatten out, just keep the same angle line. No, as we get closer and closer and closer and closer to the edge, this line becomes more and more and more curved. Think about it. It's wrapping around and away the sphere. So you want to make sure the curve right at the edge is, and I'll show you one of those when you see graphs that go, they're going up like this, like this, like this. And all of a sudden, as they begin to go like this, they become this. And I'm going on one of these, right? Where you have a line that's going this way. And as they become sharper, harder, they go exponentially this way. So that's what I'm talking about. As we reach the edges of round forms, you want to consider curving. If you're dealing with a round shape, cylinders, spheres, you want to make sure here at the edges, you create that illusion of light really wrapping around and away. So both of them right here, it literally looks like that graph that I just showed you, how it just goes up and almost backwards as it curves. And the illusion is created immediately. Just like I did a little bit of curve on this line here, it begins to give us that sensation of sphere. If I did it flat, if I did a flat line straight across, you would probably still see it as a circle that's just divided in half. Okay, so now comes the cast shadow. My light direction is here, so it points to right here. I could see it at the edge, and I could actually see it as a shape on the top surface of this cube coming right across to here. So identifying shapes of light and shadow differently from what we think, our brain telling us, oh, the top side of the cube, or usually we run into more problems when we're thinking eyes, nose, mouth. Instead of thinking of it that way, look at it as simple shapes. So I could see this, and I could see a really sharp, what I was talking about, that sharp curving of light right into the edge of the top side of this. I hope you could see it. It really slices in, creating a sharp angle. And then I have it down here. So down here, same direction of the light. Now I'm dealing with the cast shadow of a cube, which is going to be much straighter until it meets the sphere, which is right about here, and it's all the way round. Sure. Yeah, so from the light source, I'm seeing it coming in from here. Can you see that line? I'm making it really, really light. So as the direction comes here, it touches the edge of my solid, giving me the terminator. But if it continues, because light's traveling in a straight line, it also points right here to that surface where the shadow is, this object is blocking the light. Same on this side. Because it's the same light direction, as I come down here, it should point right there. Yes. So this line and this line, it should point right to there. And now we see this as, let's call this the right edge, left edge of the solid. This would be the right edge. But because it's a three-dimensional, we should also see this point here as the front, right? Because if this is a sphere, let's call this the left side, right side. This is the front, and we don't see the back. But the front also has a volume. So this line would give me that point right there. And that's how I identify my shadow. And I could actually draw these lines right here so you could visualize it a little bit better. Do you see that now? And that is what I want to I want to see it that way. I want to think about it that way. And obviously, as it reaches here, we could see that the block, there's light here. So when we consider the same light direction for the cube, we only see a little bit right here. Maybe this first edge there. And for the actual shape of the shadow, I can actually focus more on just think of it as when you see a cloud and it looks like a bunny. It's still a cloud. So here, this shadow, I want to interpret that shadow in whatever that looks like. So I could see it as this straight edge with a sharp angle that then curves and cones this way. And some of us might see, alligators or something in there. That's very helpful. If you can identify the shape, the actual shape of it, instead of having to. And again, it's always looking for what works in order to give you more clues to solve the puzzle. That's basically it. You're very welcome. Okay, so here we go to, let's see. If you're with us so far, I'll give you a couple seconds. This is our next step. It's going to be a little bit of introduction here. So we dealt with, I'm going to do the demo down here. We dealt with straight, vertical, horizontal, diagonal lines, curve lines. I'm going to come to the point now where what we're going to do to this drawing, it's called scumbling. So scumbling is all of these lines in one continuous line. So how does that work? Best way might be if I show you. So I'm going to start here with the shadow shape. And obviously this entire thing is shadow. So instead of me working with hatching, I'm going to work with, we talked about this, the jazz of lines. So I'm going to go up, down, left, right, diagonal, up, down, left, right, again, curve. One great way to think about this is think of letters. I should show you here. Think of the letter C. Think of the letter U. Think of the letter N. Think of the letter M. Think of the letter V or W. And what's happening? I'm putting all of them, and the letter, obviously, the letter O. The letter, I like to do the letter S, believe it or not. I think of it more as an S than a figure 8. Because what I'm doing here is putting all of these together, but not repeating them. So I'm doing letter. Most of us will tend to just do the letter O over and over. And that becomes too repetitive. What you want to do is break the pattern. So one great way I like to do this is I'm going to take the biggest scumble line that goes up, down, left, right, curve, up, right, left, all directions. And we don't know when it's going to shift up, down, left, right into the letter N, the letter W, the letter O, the letter, or the figure 8. They do get bigger or smaller and more dense as we develop saturation. But we are moving away from straight lines. Let me show you one shift here. Right there. So if you could see it here, my pencil's moving in 360 degrees. Now I begin to notice that the cast shadow is denser, darker than this side. So I want to feel the lightness, darkness, and saturate the different areas. I also want to feel the direction of the surface that I'm working on. So if it's flatter, I'm going to tend to keep my lines and my directions going in somewhat that surface direction. But again, the best word I can come up with is jazz and feeling, because you're really, really feeling the lines, all of them. Now, pressure also very crucial here. Your pressure and your amount of saturation are going to be key, because you do not need to press hard to get darkness. You just stay over that same area and scumble, 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 scumble until you get to that darkness that you're looking for. Also, remember the pencils. Moving from one pencil, you can do this whole thing with HB, light, figure eights, letter S, letter U, letter M, letter W. And again, I'm jazzing, jazzing, jazzing. I'm not afraid to do this, which is I'm here in the shadow, but I could just watch this. If you're looking, I'm going to go out of my shadow, and I'm going to just go lighter and scumble outside of it. Even in here. Now I'm really, really jazzing. So this might be not a popular type of jazz, maybe, until it starts making sense or it gives you a good feeling. And I'm going, see, I'm scumbling all over because I know how these layers are going to look later on. As long as I'm not confusing the lines that I need, like these or these, and I can limit my scumbling from big, light, to medium, smaller, and darker. So again, I have all of these darker areas of scumbling, and I'm just jazzing it up. When I get into this shadow shape, I have to be very careful here. Look at that beautiful reflected surface. So we begin to work with reflected light and how I'm going to develop that. So I want to get a sense of squinting. Now, I'm going to call your attention here. If you squint, is this on the sphere, reflected light, is it lighter or darker than this, your light shape? You need to answer that question. It's darker. 1 or 2 or 3 degrees darker, but it's darker. And you want to make sure you preserve that. You want to compare the lightness of direct light to the sphere and the amount of value that you have on this side, on the front side. We called it the front. And also compare squinting really hard. You have to see the difference between, obviously, you see the difference between this side and this side, right? We have light and shadow here. But what about this one and this little piece of top that we see here? It definitely is brighter because it has direct light. This one's on the side. So it does receive maybe 45% of the amount of light, but this one has direct light intensity. So you want to make sure you plan the intensity differences between this side, and also this side. And then this side right here, the top side, and this, they're very close. So yes, they're going to be pretty much the white of the paper, if not just a couple of ultra super light spaced scumble lines like I did here, which you could see, you can literally see them. They're hair thin, and that's about it. Everything else, I want to make sure I consider how dark, so the opposite of how, considering how light, I also want to see how dark. So I see this right here as my darkest. I see 2 things. The occlusion of my cast shadow, that means where the 2 objects meet, and there is absolutely no reflected light. That's going to be my darkest scumble. So it's really tiny little letter O, letter U type shapes. As I scumble, very, very small and very, very repetitive in that space, saturating, moving away. And you'll see that it is much more fun than the hatching, I think. Hatching is really cool, but this scumbling really begins to show your feelings and somewhat your personality, because it frees your line. And your line making, I'm going to tell you right about here is where you pay attention. Close attention, which is the transition from dark to light, which is the mid tones. You want to make sure you have a nice, and that's where your drawings become extremely beyond successful, is how you manage the transition from the dark to the light, and those tiny little small areas where you have a little gradient of midtones, it's called, where it looks like shadow, but it's actually in the light. It's just a lower intensity of light and the smooth transition of it, especially with the sphere. And I scumble away. Always, always, always remember, keep your eyes on your reference as long as possible. You should be looking at your reference 90 to 95% of the time. So if your eyes on your paper for a minute, then you're going to have to look at your reference photo for 90 minutes. So it should be a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds on your paper. But you need to keep identifying and observing and reading. And you can maintain the control, especially with scumbling, where you could look and your hand is, I'm going to show you really quick so you could see me. And I know you can't see actually you could, but I'm looking at the screen where my reference is. My paper is down here. And maybe I could do a split screen. Kind of. Make this a little bit smaller. And get rid of this one. So there we go. So you see me. You see my pencil here. And you see me not looking at my paper like this, but at the screen. And once you place your pencil, you're looking for those little tiny clues and just confirm your position. But you're literally looking 90 to 95% of the time. And you get the feel. Your hand responds. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. You will not lose track of where you're supposed to be. And if you do, it slows you down. But the worst thing you could do is just do this and keep your eyes down on your paper, because then you're just making up information. And by the time you look up and down, you're doing the opposite. You're looking at the reference for 10% of the time. There we go. When in fact it should be the opposite. You should be looking at your reference 90 to 95% of the time. Now I'm coming here near some of these edges. My scumble gets a little bit light, not lighter, but more compressed, a little bit slower in pace. I'm avoiding any type of line, meaning outline, edge drawing. I'm keeping it all scumble all the way through. Now your scumble might dull your pencil a little bit faster. There we go. And Again, keeping your eyes, deciphering all the information because it's all there. And it's for you to discover. And that's the fun about this. Whether it's a sphere or a bird or a face, the goal is to look for the clues and look for ways to use your techniques to develop and transfer and interpret those clues right onto paper. And this is starting to take really good shape here, I feel. And you realize that with scumbling, it's probably one of the best techniques to create textures. And then, here's the big payoff. You can mix them. Not right now. Don't start hatching, or because that takes a little bit of, it's risky, but eventually you'll feel like you're using what's appropriate for your drawing, what it calls for, with different techniques and somewhat of a fusion of it. It's not mixing, it's more like a fusion. It's like a cross-hatching scumbling technique that starts to appear. And that is amazing because you're still layering, you're still doing the technical thing, which is observation of the key elements. And then everything else is becoming your technique, your skill, and how it adapts to transfer those thoughts, those feelings better. I always like to think about it as a metaphor for life. You know, when we're toddlers, we communicate in a different way. And as we grow and learn, we get better at it. We don't throw tantrums anymore to when we can't get what we want. We figure out a way, and we figure out it's just, again, the communication. In the end, this is communication. You have to realize that's what you're doing. You're communicating an idea, and you're using a type of language, visual, that requires skill. So just like a speaker, public speaker, practices and studies and minimizes rants or ideas, simplifies the thought. Here you're doing pretty much the same thing. Getting really, really good at communicating. Communicating line, shape, volume, light. And then it gets beyond that because it's emotion, feeling. And some people may ask, how come yours looks so happy? Or, ooh, this one looks moody. Or anxious, or you name it. That's a next level. That's when you really have good comprehension of the fundamentals, and then you can really, really apply your skill to it, your technique to manipulate those things. There's a little bit of darkness, darker shadow here on this side. And again, my line becomes looser as I really, really do my best to read, in this case, value, shifting darks within the darks. And then we can get into the background. So making decisions on what type of scumble. I'm going to show you one really quick that I actually use for my personal work, which would be kind of like script. It almost, and people ask me, it looks like I'm writing, and you can almost see how they begin to resemble letters. I don't know if you could see it that close. I'm going to do it here bigger. So it actually, you can identify letters, and it looks like I'm writing really fast. And that's the kind of scumbling that I use for my painting and my work, where people actually see words sometimes. And the intention is that, like, oh, does that say, something? MEL. They actually see that. But because I'm overlapping and doing kind of subconscious, automatic type of line, just line marks, who knows? Maybe there are thoughts pouring out and there's somewhat of a shorthand. So all the different ways that you could develop these. So zoom out just a little more as we get bigger. And there we have it.